total of $452,000 with our labor included in that. At $530,000 for phase 2 work. So phase 1 and 2 gets us from Carver, north side, across the bridge, close to Springwater Road.
Okay. Yeah, I understand someone had a question here. I'm sorry. Mr. Sterling, go ahead.
On your page 7, you referred to Clackamas County and Sunrise Water Authority to design the transmission pipeline, short and long distribution. Is there not, in effect, a wheeling agreement between CRW and Sunrise currently in effect?
Oh. On page 7?
He's on page
Yeah,
7.
CIP 7?
CIP.
And
Budget document stuff.
the document itself. Thank you.
That was my highlight point too there, so.
And subsequently, and excuse me if I'm being repetitive with a question from over the years, the 200 customers, Mr. George, as well as the customers in the Redland system, they are in fact being serviced with South Fork water?
That is correct. Currently, they are being fed by.
Okay, I know,
Yes.
I've asked that question before. And
Yes, they are.
That's correct. So effectively, do we or do we not have any wheeling agreement with Sunrise Water Authority?
At this moment, we do not.
Okay, have we had one before in the past?
Not at that location. It has been discussed over the years, but we have not finalized that.
So any wheeling agreement would have to be site-specific?
They normally are.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions about this Carver project? Yes, Mr. Was it McNeil?
Yeah.
Okay, and then Mr.
So, when the new interties comes across the bridge, what's the difference? I don't know what it costs you to make water, and I don't know what it costs South Fork to make water. Does the district save money doing that?
Yes, I'm getting there. I'm
I
just
know.
formulating my thoughts here a little bit. Initially, it will cost us more because if you take the cost of this crossing for 200 customers, obviously that ratio of cost would be greater.
I'm not looking at that. I know that
Long-term-
infrastructure costs are.
Long-term, it will cost us less or break even. One of the net benefits is then we have two sources,
Yeah, oh yeah, that's always good, especially from a fire perspective, that's always good.
that too.
Yeah.
It also gives us an opportunity, which, because this is not a planning session, but I'll just briefly go over it. We have an opportunity to take a look at the whole system, being able to feed all the way from Carver, from the north side, all the way to Beaver Creek tank system.
At the
Beaver Creek
school.
system at school.
Wow.
By going through the easterly half edge of the district by replacing lines we need to replace anyway, which is bigger capacity, be transmission then, tying some systems together, and we start minimizing how much we have to feed through Oregon City. And the planning side, we won't even get into the potential franchise fees in the future. If we feed through Oregon City in the future, there may be additional costs that we can't really figure
Right.
today.
My
I believe there's an
question was just,
opportunity for dual fees.
you know, does it, cubic foot for cubic foot, you know, who builds water cheaper, you know, I mean, so the customers,
Yes,
when I turn on the water, go, wow, this gallon of water is gonna cost me, 16 cents more because we're trying to do it ourselves instead of, using more premium we already have.
agreed, understand. So will it cost us more? I believe in the long haul, we'll have a dual system with comparable costs.
Okay. I mean, I'm all for redundant systems, don't get me wrong, I was just,
And I don't redundant system, or make blue systems just to do this loop systems or for redundancy. It doesn't make financial and of course customer service long haul. And this is a long-term plan. This is not short-term planning. And not to get into a planning session here, but that's where we're heading with this.
Mr. Kalani, I think did you have a question there or a comment?
Yeah, well, just a quick one.
How large is that line going over the bridge?
We put an 18-inch.
18, okay, that's all I need.
Are there any other questions about the carpet program? Yes, Mr. Sterling?
Mr. McNeil, the ratepayers of CRW are
Mr.
currently...
Sterling, please direct your questions through the chair, and then I will handle the question if you like.
Right, just as a note of information to Mr. McNeil,
Okay?
the CRW ratepayers are currently paying in excess of $500,000 per year to South Fork Water for their water, which can be supplemented by CRW's water.
I don't know if that requires any comment or response at this point. Shall we have any other questions or comments from our committee? Okay, if we can move on to our next CIP project description.
This has to do with the infrastructure between our communications methods from this building over down to the water treatment plant and operations. My understanding, and I'm not an expert here, so I'm using some knowledge or some verbiage that I was told. Basically, we have two T1s going down there. And in my opinion, I've tried using the system down there that I didn't realize how bad it was. It's worse than my rural dial-up I used to have. It is poor at best, and we communicate daily with it. We have our servers here, our drives here, our whole information, our GIS, everything's here. And trying to communicate down there is very difficult. So the plan here with the fiber optics, we plan on trying to come up with a program to do that. The county, through federal funding, has a program that they will actually build the fiber optics from this building to the water treatment plant, dedicated fiber. So it won't be going through the internet, out through the cloud, or whatever, all that other stuff is. And we're always worried about security. So this is a dedicated fiber to us. The only interconnect we will be with the county system, because they ping the system for continuity. I'll use those terms. In our agreement with them that we're looking at, they will respond within 4 hours to repair any down lines. That's the agreement says. Okay? Right now, the two T1s cost us $800 a month. $1,200, excuse me, $1,200 a month. The fiber will cost us $250 a month for usage. And it's, by the way, the Clackamas County Broadband Express, that's the program. And let's go to the map. Right now, they have asked us to contribute $10,000 for some directional boring up in the area of, hot button, that one there? Oh, there it is. I'm colorblind. I look for this little red button and it doesn't help me at all. There's some directional boring here that needs Comcast in their estimates, I think was around $20,000 that we would have to pay. So we'd save ourselves about $10,000 there. They will actually run the fiber optics down to our office, come on around, down to operations. The reasons they can't come across here is the railroad. They're not able to get the agreements in place in a timely manner, so they're opted for this system. It is what it is. So the budget that you're seeing here is within this year's CIP, we can easily spend $10,000 to do some directional boring, do a little hardware. They will finish this for their agreement before the end of this fiscal year. It has to be into their budget constraints. They have to spend their money. So they're gonna really work hard to get this done. Then our budget items is for new switchgear and routers at both ends, which are the pumps. I call them the pumps to move information back and forth. But that's my version. That's not IT people.
You're a water engineer.
That's not pumps. So we will basically have fiber optics, and I can't tell you the speed, but it'll be like sitting here almost, doing what it's like in the building here. And our routers and switches that we have now are antiquated anyway. They do need to be updated. So for $115,000, we'll be able to, here again, here's the hardware we're talking about. Here's the labor internally. We have some vendors in here. And for about $115,000, we can upgrade our IT system and communicate between our buildings. And what's nice about it, we don't have to build fiber optics, which is going to cost us a small fortune.
Are there any questions here from our committee? I think Madam Wolfram?
Thank you, sir. We are, if I'm hearing this correctly, saving about $9,000 to $10,000 the first year of monthly costs with this new system. But that savings won't kick in until the next year about this time when they'll be completed with the system. Is that correct, Mr. George?
That's probably about correct. It'll probably take us,
Okay.
once they finish the fiber, it'll probably take us 8, 9 months to get all the switch gear and the routers all in and everything up and operational. Yeah, so we're probably talking good, yeah.
But our expense savings from that point forward would be about $9,500 a year. Probably a little more than that.
Somewhere in there.
95 to 10,000
Yeah,
a
I've done
year.
the math.
Okay.
It'll save us $1,000
A month, roughly, 950.
Okay.
yeah.
Are there any other, Mr. McNeil?
Did you look at microwave hop, dual OC3s between here and there? Because you have line of sight between here and there.
We did look at
Did
that
you? Good.
when we had a network engineer, I think, about a year ago,
Yeah.
look at it. And actually, this fell in our lap in the sense that because we're a FEMA agency and we're a government agency, there is a program put on by the federal government of Wire America, Rural America. And we heard about this kind of 13th hour. And so the other significant cost that we're gonna have is the routing that you saw on there. We won't have that expense, that's all borne under the federal grant.
Under the 22 million the county got.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I was just wondering because the operational cost, the recurring cost of the county will never go away.
Right.
Never. And when I was at ODOT, they kept putting in fiber and paying and paying and paying, and then I said, well, let's put in a few hops, and we put it, now all we put in is hops. We don't wire this because you have to locate it, you have to, if it gets dug up, you can't dig up a wireless hop. You know, it's redundant, I mean, and you can get redundant ones if you want, you can run 2 parallels, and I was just, you know, because it's so close, I mean, this is just.
We looked at the 3 options. We looked at coax, we looked at fiber,
Right.
and then we looked at the wireless.
Yeah, microwave hop.
May I take a straw poll at this point? There seemed to be some discussion on this item. Is there anybody on the committee who has serious reservations about this CIP project? Okay, so if we can sort it out and take the time later and cover it and go over it. Are there any other CIP projects that staff wants to bring forth? Okay, I'd like to take this opportunity then to allow public comment and questions and we'll see if we can't answer any questions coming forward. Is there anybody in the public who wishes to speak? Okay, seeing none, we're going to continue to race through this agenda. And we have, I'm committed to at least 9 o'clock. It seems like we might be able to move through this enough to take some action in my personal opinion right now. But I'm not going to try to influence that. I want to make sure we have a good exercise. So maybe, are we ready to move on to number 11 here, general fund? Ms. Bright? All right, would you like a break?
Yes.
Okay, let's take, if it's possible, can we reconvene at 7:50? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We'll take a break then. Here, if we can reconvene. I think we're at a stage, item 11, general fund. And we'll see how fast we go through that, and we can decide or discuss how we want to move forward. Toward 9 o'clock, my goal is, I don't want to go over 9 if we can help, but if we're close to concluding our challenge here, then let's, I don't want to overlook that opportunity either, so. Ms. Bright?
Chair Russell, I would like just real quick to touch one more thing on the CIP, and that's simply that what Bob and Adam were talking about were the projects that we have in the proposed budget. And I just want to say that we do have funding sources for those projects, and that comes from the Capital Reserve Fund and from the SBC Reserve Fund. So the projects that are appropriate for SBCs, we're going to utilize SBC money, and any other projects will use money from the Capital Reserve.
Okay, are we working off of your handout now
Yeah.
that you had earlier?
Yes.
You're at page 17 then?
Yes, page 17.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This question, could you explain to us how your SBC fund is set up? I don't know, whether, I'm familiar with SBCs, and I know how they have to be spent where they're generated, and I understand, but I don't understand how it relates to water.
We can charge SBCs for new services, and we have rates set up based on the meter size. And so we have kind of finite rates for the 3/4 inch and 1 inch meter, and then when it's meters larger than that, we do estimates and determine based on the impact on the system of those larger meters, and then the actual cost for installation, and they do a calculation for the SDCs. We do have improvements and reimbursements. So reimbursements, the impact that they have on the system that already exists, and improvements if the system needs to be expanded to accommodate the need that's being put on the system.
Okay, so SEC dollars can get spent anywhere in the district where it's appropriate for capacity or those kind of improvements, but not for maintenance.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
That answer your question?
Does.
Yeah, it's a bigger question in my mind because it kind of plays back to the current rate study that the district's working on, but it also relates back to the update of the master plan FY 2014-2015, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that might have implication on rates and projections for SDCs. How much do they pay for the total infrastructure upgrades, how much is the rates, et cetera, et cetera. I think it'll be a real challenge here in the planning in about a year and a half from now, roughly.
Yes, I think you're right.
Mr. Moore, did you have any other reflection on that question of Mr. McNeil?
No, I think it was pretty.
Right, okay.
Pretty thorough answer.
Okay, so I've got it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, now we're going to move to the general fund, and for those of you that have been on the budget committee before, we have not done these decision packages, but these are items that are typically kind of one-time deals or sometimes something new that we're talking about doing. Now, everyone has had an opportunity to look through the budget documents, so I would like to kind of open it up for questions. I do have the individuals that are responsible for these different things are in the room, so if there's questions that I can't answer, we've got hopefully those resources to answer them. These are not in any particular order of priority. We actually have them based on the expenditure category that they're in. So I don't want anybody to think number one is our most important thing and number 9 is our least important. They're just by their expenditure category. And the first one that we have is utilization of a safety services coordinator that we would pay a third party for a safety services coordinator. So does anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts on that?
Yes, Mr. Cumberson?
Cumberson.
Excuse me.
Sorry. I know we're looking outside to, I guess it's Wilson Airgood for this service at this time.
Yes.
And given that we lost our in-house person, I guess to retirement, we don't have the service currently. I was wondering in the future, maybe not this coming fiscal year, but in a subsequent fiscal year, would it be possible to use this year to get one of our own in-house people trained up to speed and then consider for a specialty like that a differential on their salary? It would be considerably cheaper than an outsourced person, and it would give an opportunity to our staff to earn a little bit more money and have the service in-house. Is that something we could look at?
I think that that is something that we could look at. Certainly, probably our biggest challenge with that is the capacity of individual staff members to do that in lieu of other work. When we had the retiree, we kind of restructured the engineering department and brought in somebody that had different expertise but not the safety expertise. So I don't think that that's an impossible task. I think that it could be looked at, but again, it would be determining if we have somebody that could spend that 20% of their time on safety rather than the other tasks that they typically do.
I was just looking at it from the point of view of agency I worked for before. If you spoke a different language, if you learned a different language that was needed in your department, there was a differential to the staff member, and so it encouraged them to be fluent in a language, and I thought this might be a possibility for us to explore and have some savings in the long run. That was my only question.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we did look at that. What we ended up with was a half-time, money for a half-time position. And so what we did, because we're not large enough to have a full-time resource, and we utilized the services of Wilson Air Guard, we entered into a trial agreement with them to see how that would work on a contracted basis rather than spending the additional money and the carrying cost of actually using an in-house labor resource for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other particular questions on this? Carol, are you going to go through each one of these packaged items and then ask us for feedback?
I can do that, or if people have questions about items in particular, we can do that, because there might be some items.
Let me poll the committee. Do you want a presentation on each one of these decision packages? I personally don't. I reviewed them. I personally support all but one of them. Have some reservations, but I feel comfortable about what is seen. But I do appreciate the questions. I think Mr. Humberton had a good, I apologize, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
It's an unusual good question, so I don't want to forego that. Madam Wolfram?
Sir Russell, if we could maybe hear if anyone has any uncomfortableness with any of these, and at least get that on the table, so, because someone else may have an uncomfortable about it, and go through it that way, I would feel more comfortable.
Okay, well, how about I go ahead and then poll the committee group. Are there any concerns? Again, what we're talking about is the quote-unquote package concept. That would be basically a separate kind of consideration for the general fund, either in or out type of thing, or modified. And it's GF4 is the page that starts on, goes through GF 10? 15, excuse me. My favorite is the GF 15 is the computer picture of all the bugs. Do we want to hear a presentation on each one, or move through this? Okay, why don't we go ahead and then, does anybody have any comments they wish to make on each one? We can go through each one quickly and poll the group, and then what I'd like to do when we're done, we're kind of taken out of order a little bit, but I would like some public input questions so we can get this package concept kind of crystallized. Okay, the first one was covered by Ms. Bright, the Safety Services Coordinator. Any other discussion, questions on that? Okay, the next one is the COOP exercise. I did have some questions, minor questions, that I called staff on this afternoon for the clarification. I wasn't that familiar with this, but I think it's important, but I do want to poll the group. Any concerns here or questions? Yes, I thought that, why is it important? The language there was a little bit confusing to me, so I had to call and ask whether or not there is a grant in progress right now in the planning, and yes, there is. So it's part of a next step this year. So number 3 was continuity of operations, equipment and supplies, facilities and security, 5,000. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, moving along, number 4, emergency operations plan, update, facilities and security. The last plan was written by the Portland Water Bureau in 2002. So it'll be updated now from 2002. Are there any staff observations quickly, or everybody knows what this is all about? Okay. I'm just a committee member. The board gets to deal with it later. Okay, number 5, vulnerability assessment review. Vulnerability assessment review and update, facilities security, $7,500. I thought this was a really important one, along with the camera that I think comes up later in our discussion. One of the questions I had myself was, how are local MS4 agencies, this is surface water discharge into our waters, how are these agencies daily monitoring discharge into our streams, which feed into our river, which we then take out of the river? It was one of the questions in my mind, and it seems to me that this assessment review starts answering some of those questions of how well our other agencies are working with us to make sure that the stuff doesn't get in the river that shouldn't get in the river, because they're under charge under the Clean Water Act with DEQ. Okay, maybe I created a comment, sorry. Ms. Wolfram, did you have a comment there?
Well, my only comment was in response to your comment.
Yes.
And that is, do we know exactly what the vulnerability is that we're looking for? And if we do, is that enough money?
Well, this is, you can pick it up. It sounds like an assessment review and update. In other words, that's what they're looking at, is how well off we are in terms of our safety and vulnerabilities.
Well, knowing that our security report costs us X amount of thousands of dollars the last time it was done, my only question was, is this a shorter term assessment or longer term assessment that $7,500 would cover it? That would be my only question.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
Commissioner Lewis Wolfram, there was 2 prior assessments done, if you'll recall, and we have not done an assessment since then, which is over 5 years ago, and so this is really an update to that.
Okay, thank you. And that will be enough to cover it?
Yes.
I can ask questions for me later.
Well, okay, great, all right. Let's move on. Number 6, this is the System Development Charges, SDC rate study, professional contract services.
Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Kerr.
is this going to be tied with the retail commercial rate study? Because the 2 will be intertied because of the transfer requirements. And so my question is, are those going to be correlated?
We are currently in the midst of a cost of service rate study, and so to me, this seemed like an ideal time to do the SDC study as well, and so all of that information from the cost of service would be available to be incorporated into the SDC study to determine the appropriate rate that should be charged.
That's vital, since the SDC one's not been done for too many years.
This would be an interim study in my mind, because when we update our master plan and we start talking about 16-inch water lines going down the rural area of our service district, I'm sure there are other questions that come up at that point. But any more concerns or questions on number 6? Mr. Humbertson? I'm working on it.
Can't. It might be easier. Have any other districts done a recent SDC rate study? And part B to that would be, are we so different that even if they had, it wouldn't be applicable to our needs?
My understanding is that the SDC study would be very specific to our district. We have issues that don't really mirror what other people do. We have a water treatment plant and the distribution system. So somebody else, like a city that may just do distribution, for example, Oregon City purchases from South Fork. or another water district that purchases their water somewhere, and they're mostly concerned with the impact on their distribution system. So we have that combination, which to me makes it pretty specific to our entity, and we have to be able to actually justify that methodology.
Okay. Are there any more questions on number 6 here? I also found it interesting, just as a comment, on GF11 page, it shows a diagram or a chart of comparison of SDC charges of CRW compared to others within our, actually within the area, generally easterly of I-5, in other words, our east area, the urban area that's in Clackamas County for the most part. We're not done yet, I'm sorry. Compensation survey, number 7. This is the one I had a little bit of question with. It was proposed as $15,000. And I guess my observation is that I think administration knows enough what's going on in this country that being part of professional organizations nationwide, these groups do these studies constantly, and I don't think it's going to take a lot of work unless there's some union issues here that you have to do your homework. But it's like I say, it's $15K, and I'm not going to quibble one way or another on it. But that was just a minor reservation. I'm sorry to interrupt. But did anybody else have any?
Pretty much covered it. I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Wolfram.
And so I'm assuming that because we're including that in the 13-14 fiscal year, that there is a new contract being contemplated starting in fiscal 14.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Fiscal which?
Fiscal
13, 14?
Well, 14, 15.
Right,
Right.
14, 15.
14,
I said
15?
14, so, sorry.
So in other words, we're talking negotiations next
Spring.
winter or spring.
Right.
And what we, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Moore?
What we're doing in order to try to save money is contracting with Clackamas Community College and have them do the compensation study for us, rather than either do it ourselves or go out, because these compensation studies get to be pretty expensive, and for an organization our size, it's just not warranted to participate in that. Then we also looked at the AWWA, which is the American Water Works study, and the problem that they have with that study is Northwest entities or utilities don't really participate in the study to the same magnitude or degree as the rest of the United States. I think when we looked last time, I think there was, 2 agencies within the entire Northwest, and one was King County, and I can't remember who the other one was that actually participated in the study.
We didn't see a lot of comparables.
I mean, we certainly must be on the left side of the country, so I guess that's probably why. But now, Madam Wolfram,
Cindy,
please.
yeah. So is this comparable to the last study that we had done in 2008-9 or 2009-10, whichever one it was?
Mr. Chair,
Sorry.
that was the
Yes, sir.
Clackamas Community College that had done that study. And one of the difficulties that you have when you get into collective bargaining is when you try to do this yourself, the objectivity of the in-house study is, I can almost guarantee you, will be challenged by the union. And to go to the table without some empirical data, especially in these times where you're looking at things like cost of living increases and those things, when there hasn't been much movement in the market, you need to have that kind of data to support what you're doing.
Okay, any other comments or questions here among the committee on number 7, compensation survey? Okay, number 8, computer hardware, software upgrade of equipment, $23,000, and Ms. Kemper?
Now, I'm wondering if there's been any study of use of some of the open source software instead of always paying Microsoft all of these big fees for use of their Office product, that kind of thing. I've installed LibreOffice on my own, on my new Windows 8 computer, and it's working great, but that's not under the situation you might be using. Also, I'm using Sumatra PDF because Adobe's having some problems.
Mr. Moore?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Kemper, we have not looked directly at open source. You know, what this is that, as you know, we spent quite a bit of time over the last several years upgrading our servers.
Right.
And what happens is that our desktops are, in some cases, still 2003 versions. And so,
Boat anchors.
so what we have is a compatibility problem. We have gone through and looked at our engineering organization and have brought them up to speed, but we have not done that with the rest of the organization.
Ms. Kemper, does that answer your question or not, or?
Yeah, I just don't know if it's worth it. You know, I know Microsoft charges quite a lot for use of their Office program on individual computers. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. And quite frankly, that's one of the problems that we have is that industry as a whole has kind of chastised Microsoft for changing too quickly.
Right.
You know, because
Yeah,
every
they're
time you get a
always
suite
doing
on, excuse me, every time you get a suite on your network, then they come up with an upgrade, and I think there's been a rebellion for people saying, until there's an absolute business need to switch over, we're not moving, and we're long overdue.
Yeah, just wondering if maybe one or two select ones you might want to try something like that and see if it was.
And quite frankly, I don't know how open source would work on an internal network environment, where you might be able to do that individually, trying to do it in a network configuration.
Huh?
My wife thought it was a great idea. Because I asked her, what do you think about this? She says, yeah, when you're at 2003, you get pretty old. And you can order a laptop that's 6 ounces and has more power capability and processing than the thing sitting on the table. Technology is changing. Are there any other questions or comments on the computer upgrades? Okay, number 9. This is my favorite one. Algae and particulate monitoring. Mine have a flow cam, which I first thought this was going to end up in the sewer pipe or something, but after reading this, I understand it. An observation I have, I appreciate the district thinking ahead here, because I remember a couple years ago reading articles that they were having mussel larvae coming out of the Boulder Dam, Las Vegas, and you know, people go, oh, don't worry about it, Pat, it's going to take care of itself. And of course, you see the Great Lakes, what's going on. So in my mind, you know, now it's a reality. I mean, I don't know if anyone's done surveys in the Willamette River, but it is a reality, and we have shipping in our port. Who knows what they're bringing in? So I thought this was a rather novel feature here personally, but I do want to get input. Ms. Wolfram?
You know, I'm not sure if anyone else has had a chance to listen to the description of the department that covers this. And Suzanne, Miss Suzanne, is that her name?
Suzanne DiLorenzo.
Yeah, thank you, DiLorenzo. Miss DiLorenzo is a dynamic dynamite of a person and scientist. And this is going to keep her focused on getting the information that nobody is really doing in our river to help keep it clean, and other people are willing to come to us to get that information, and we might be able to underwrite some of this in the near future. I'd say go for it, and not only go for it because of the absolute necessity of having something like this for our sake, but because it will help improve the interactions that CRW has with other water districts and with the public at large. So I think it's a terrific idea of where to turn, and I was really glad to see it at the end of the packaging.
Any additional comments or questions? Mr. Humbert?
Stunned.
Stunned.
Karen.
Mr. Humbert, stunned. I apologize.
Yes, sir.
I honestly do, believe me.
That's okay. I can't agree more. I think that CRW should be on the cutting edge of as much as possible, of the science of water quality. And if this will help us do that, I definitely think we should do it. I think it will help us partner with other districts. I just really can't see the downside to going this direction, and it fits in my idea of CRW being a leader in water quality as well as water production. So,
Okay, any other comments?
Echo City's
Okay,
comments, that's all right.
Okay, any other comments there? I'll take one last comment. If you promise me, I'll support this, if you promise me you include microinvertebrates so that you can report your findings to our surface water management agencies, WES, and our cities, because the microinvertebrate analysis for the scientists, they know that means stream health, and that means our salmon in our creeks and rivers, and I assume that part of this study effort will actually involve creeks, wouldn't it not, Mr. Moore?
Well, if I promised you, I wouldn't know what I was talking about.
But I'm just curious,
So I would defer to.
would there be testing in the streams that feed into the river upstream of the intake plant? I mean, is that kind of the goal a little bit?
Well, and I'll shut up after this one
Okay.
comment. Because we're the furthest upstream other than Estacada in terms of a treatment facility, one of the things that we have an opportunity to do is to create an early warning system. And so as a result, by having this type of equipment, it's one of the tools that our water quality department has asked for to assist with this early detection. I'll stop there because that's about as far as I can go, and I'll defer to Ms. DiLorenzo.
Would the committee wish to hear a few comments from her?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. DiLorenzo.
Okay, where to start? So the plan is, to do a monitoring campaign out in the watershed. We'll work on it in phases. We won't do a full-fledged monitoring all the streams initially until we get everything down pat. So we'll really be focusing on the first 2 years probably on our intakes and the reservoirs for the upstream where we often see algae, and there's a lot of boating activity. Boating activity brings the possibility of invasive species, as we discussed. So that's why we're going to start there. And it'll also help us keep a pulse on the algae. Our plan is to have all this data available to the customers online. We've been spending quite a great deal of time building online databases and things where people can actually go and access it. So it will all be available to the community, probably, depending on how well it goes, within a few days of our taking the sample. What it allows us to do is, instead of having to wait over a week to do algae counts or spending hours upon hours looking through a microscope trying to see if you can see any invasive species, we'll know within 20 minutes of taking a sample. The huge advantage of this is if you're talking about algae species, if you have a bloom, we could take a sample. We'll know within 20 minutes of running our sample whether or not it is a potential toxin-producing species. We'll also know whether or not it is at levels where it could be producing that toxin. What's neat is it also links up with the program that we're just starting to develop with Clackamas Community College, where we're doing a lot of molecular work. If we have the ability to do that, then if we know that we have a potential toxin-producing species, and we know that it's met potentially toxin-producing levels, we can actually go in and look at the gene and see if it is in fact producing that toxin. It sounds like a lot of work, but we can do it all within a day, whereas if we actually sent out a sample, we'd have to wait 3 days minimum. So we would know almost immediately. So it's neat because this one piece of equipment links up to a number of other projects.
Mr. Moore, any other comments on the program proposed?
No, not to me.
Any questions here? Yes, Mr. Kohler.
Well, will that assist us in the algae bloom areas and working with Southport?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Do I have to direct? I always mess this up.
Gotta go now.
Yeah, no, it actually, one of our plans is that we actually think that we can watch and determine or anticipate bloom developments. Because instead of just going out and taking a sample when we see a bloom, we're actually going to try and track it. So there's a number of other species out there that a lot of times what happens is you have this consortium of microbes out there, and then one guy gobbles up a whole bunch of food. Well, he dies off because he has nothing to eat, then another one picks up. So we think that this is cycling up there. So we think we can actually track it and anticipate it. So eventually, after watching it, we think that we'll be able to see when one species dies, then we know that the troublemaker is about to bloom. We can anticipate and actually start treating for it before we have the problem.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore, too. Before we move on further on that general plan funds, I wanted to allow for any public input on the question and comment. Oh, sorry, Mr. Sauer. Did you have a comment, Larry?
I was trying to wait until you got through all of the decision packages. My question is, are the decision packages ranked in priority order?
No, we didn't.
Would you do an attempt to rank them in priority order? So if we want to spend additional 200,000 or something, we'll know where the line cuts through.
We can do that. We won't.
We'll probably get to a point to hold that question as part of our budget recommendation, so keep that in mind, because that'll be an answer we need. I did want to open up quickly and briefly to the public for input on this discussion of this package. If anyone has a comment or question, now's the time. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Holloway, could you come to the front so we can get your recorded comments?
Sure.
Thank you.
Patricia Holloway. In my experience going back through 2008, sitting on the board, we've had two go-rounds of, if you will, compensation processes. In the first, the general manager reported that CRW staff on average were paid about 30% more than their compatriots outside. Then...
Ms. Holloway, let me interrupt you
Okay,
briefly
well,
here.
Sure.
Your issue is not with this expenditure package we went through, or is it?
It's with the compensation package.
Okay.
So
Well,
I'm
the
sorry,
compensation by personnel, you mean? Are you talking about personnel compensation?
I would assume so when you're talking about compensation. I don't know what...
No, I'm trying to understand, when you say compensation,
It's, oh, let me get my, it's okay.
yeah, I'm trying to get this package of 8 items
Okay.
kind of through, and then we'll get back into the whole general fund.
Item 7. Okay, my comments are on item 7, compensation package, $15,000. So it was done back in 2008 with Clackamas Community College. That was the outcome at that time. The next time it was done, we had an in-house CPA who assisted Mr. Moore with union negotiations. And I would urge that the process, if it happens, if the board decides to spend this much money on it, that the board pay very close attention. In the last go-around, after CRW had been able to remove some things from the representative employees' compensation package, clothing items, laundry, etc. That was all moved back in about 2010. And in that same time period, that negotiation included, without the knowledge of the board, a full year's salary increase payable and a sum going in. So I would recommend to the board that, or the budget committee, that should it approve this particular decision package, that it do so with some very stringent restrictions on it, so that we don't end up giving away the story. Well, I also would point out that the general manager's 6% PERS is paid by CRW, and I would hope that a compensation study would look at that, particularly in light of skyrocketing cruise expenses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holloway. Yes, Mr. Sawa?
I have a question, Ms. Holloway.
Larry, go ahead and ask the question, and we'll ask Mrs. Holloway to respond.
Did you hear my previous comment about ranking of these decision packages? And where would you rank the one that you testified about in regards to all the rest of them? Decision packages?
Chair,
Yes, Holloway. Yeah. Mr. Russell. That's okay, I'm not
Chair
good
Pat
names
Russell,
either.
yes, I know we've got too many Pats here. Chair Russell, I would respond to that question. I haven't had an opportunity to do an in-depth review, and I don't think I have all the materials that you all have, but I would think that there are certainly sufficient resources within the board and within the region to do that investigation. So I would rank it very low, personally, because we did it, once before and it didn't help at all. So I don't see the value of it. So I put it fairly low on the list. And I certainly would, since I have a chance to be back up there, very much support the algae and particle monitoring program. I think it's a great idea and very, very important for the river. Thank you for that.
Madam Holloway, thank you for your comment. And also, I wanted to mention that if this committee recommends not to consider your recommendations, I would appreciate it if you do us a favor, putting your thought in writing, and be sure to forward it to the CRW board, because they will make that final decision. If we move things along tonight, I just don't want you to think that we're just running over roughshod your input and experience on this board. So if you would kindly take some time to write that down, then I think that's an issue that can go forward. I appreciate compensation surveys and what they can do and what they don't do, so I think some of your points are valid, and that argument should be in front and center of the people who can make those final decisions if it has to come to a prioritization. For the record, though, I also want to just indicate that was $15,000. It is being proposed through the Clackamas Community College. I like the idea of the interagency partnership effort, because it benefits the community, the exercise. There may be some professors that will be able to use their expertise, things to that effect. But I just want to make that request of you as a favor, if you will kindly do that and make sure you address it to the board if we don't get to it tonight to discuss it further. Madam Wolfram?
Thank you, sir. Just a different perspective, if I might. When this last compensation survey was developed and presented to the board in 2008, I found it, and I believe most of the board found it, extremely helpful in going over the negotiated package of that year or the following year. And while it may not have appeared that way to Ms. Holloway, I found that it gave me a greater appreciation for the work that was done by the line or rank and file, if you will, people that worked in this organization, especially those that are out there and come back when things are in such distress, and to know that they were at least getting compensated on par with the rest of the people in the area. It made a big difference to me as a newer member of the board. All of our board at that point were newer members of the board. We'd only been on the board for a year and a half, and taking a look at that paperwork gave us a sense of knowing what was going on. Now, we haven't had that kind of a survey given to this governing body in the last 4 years, I believe. Even if one was updated numerically by an in-house staff person. And I would encourage us to keep it high on the list of those items that we take, knowing that our staff is compensated to the best of our ability and within our budget amounts, I think is important. Not overcompensating them when it's not possible. One of the things that that compensation survey discovered was one position that was being overcompensated, and that was dealt with appropriately. It wasn't dealt with harshly, it just was not moved forward again in the negotiating time. So I think it's a very helpful tool for both the people that are being negotiated with and the negotiators to have that kind of a tool. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wolfram. Is there any more comments on this package? Just for the benefit of the public comment, was there any more public comment before we conclude and move on with our general fund discussion? Okay. Before we move on, does this committee group right now, kind of again a little straw poll, are there any particular concerns on these packages 1 through 8? Because I'd like to kind of flag that so that when we get into our final decision making, we don't lose that thought. Okay? Okay, well, we'll move on then. Dan and Breck, can we assist us in moving on through the general fund now?
Sure.
What number on the agenda would you say we're at this point?
We're still on 11.
Number 11, thank you.
This
Okay.
is like the 11, Part 2.
Okay.
So in the budget message, we talked a lot about what the costs were, how much money we planned on spending in the general fund. Now I would like to refer the committee to the fact the resources for the general fund equals $10,462,600. That includes the beginning fund balance. It includes revenues from, as I mentioned before, 98% of the revenues are from water rates. We have other miscellaneous revenues. It also includes any transfers into the system, which we do not have any transfers into the general fund in this budget. The requirements are the personnel services, materials and services, and capital outlay. Those three make up the $7.7 million that I had talked about in the budget message. In addition to that, to get us to the $10,462,000, we have transfers where the general fund sends money to the capital reserve fund, and we also send money from the general fund to pay the debt service, a portion of the debt service. We have contingency put aside $500,000 per our financial policies, and then the remainder is the ending fund balance. So at this point, I would be happy to, if anybody has specific questions about items in the budget, if you look at page GF17, that has our expenditures by the spending categories that we typically group them into. Page GF16 kind of tells you what the line items are that are within those specific categories.
Okay, well, I think this is kind of the guts of the expense side, I guess, of the budget at this point. But before we move on to that, are you going to talk any further about your revenue resources?
I certainly can.
Okay. I wanted to poll the committee if there are any questions on the revenue side or resource side of the budget. We do have some comments on that, because I think it's important to get into that real quickly before we talk about how we're going to spend the money, whether we have it or not. I saw two hands. Ms. Kemper, I'll give you first.
Okay, mine isn't on the revenue, but it's on the total amount. You have $10,462,600 total here. And yet when I went through and added in the totals for each of these individual funds, I only came up with a little over 700, or over 7 million. What's the difference? Did I miss something?
The difference is, on the revenue side, is the beginning fund balance, so there's $2.1 million, that's our beginning fund balance. And on the requirement side, it is the transfers, contingency, and the ending fund balance.
This was under the requirements.
Yes, if you look at page GF3, it's got those numbers isolated, transfers to other funds.
But the total requirements should not add up to the 10 million?
The total requirements do, the total expenditures don't. So again, the requirements, revenues must equal requirements, but expenditures hopefully are less than
$3 million
revenues.
less.
Because 2.1 million is our beginning fund balance. And then if you look at the transfers, we've got nearly $1 million transferred out, 750,000 goes to capital outlay, goes to the capital reserve fund. 500,000 is held in contingency, and we show an ending fund balance at nearly 1.2 million.
Madam Brick, which page are you referring to those numbers there?
GF3.
GF3, page GF3?
Is
Which
the-
line are you referring to? Which column?
The proposed budget, which is the 13, proposed 13,
Okay.
14 column.
Madam Kemper, did you
What I
have
was
a
working
question?
from was GF17,
Okay.
and then the following ones for each fund.
Okay.
And those requirements did not add up to this requirement.
If you look at the next to the bottom line on GF17, the other requirements is 2,755,000.
Okay,
That is the transfers plus the contingency plus the ending
Okay.
fund balance. So yeah, that's
That's the
the point
difference
that
right
I've
there.
been trying to make, is that the expenditures are not $10 million. We're not planning on spending $10 million. We're gonna spend about 7.7.
One other question here, Mr. Humbertson.
On GF17, top right-hand side, it says capital outlay increases 91.8%. I guess that's a typo. It's actually 36.6%.
Yes, that's correct. And
Okay.
thank you for pointing that out.
Could you
Shane. That will
point to
be
that again,
corrected.
just to make sure we all know? The upper right-hand corner of the page.
Yes, personal
Last
services.
paragraph there.
Yeah, the last paragraph, where it says capital outlay increases 91.8, it's actually 36.6.
So
Right.
in the third line.
Yeah.
Are there any other, I want to make sure that, Ms. Kemper, did your question get satisfied?
yeah, that other requirements.
Okay, and then Mr. McNeil.
Just an educational thing, I'm used to working with property tax or other funded agencies, and not a rate-based one. In all the other boards that I've been on, we never collect everything. How does that work with a water district? I mean, you have losses,
Right.
internal losses, and then you have uncollected funds.
But we do have some leverage, as Mr. Collins said, we can shut people off if they don't pay. We also have a budgeted line item for bad debt expense.
Okay.
And our bad debt expense is really relatively small. I believe last year we wrote off a little over $10,000.
Oh, so it's less than 1%.
Yeah, during this economic time, it has increased.
Yeah.
It used to be, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. And so we do budget about 10,000, maybe 11,000 for uncollectible. And we do write that off every year. We'll bring that to the board at the June meeting and write it off before the end of the year.
So do you ever incur any legal expenses, or do you just write it off?
We do send certain accounts to collections, and the accounts that go to collections, the collection company keeps a percentage. So, that is part of the write-off.
Just pulling the committee here, are they satisfied with the information being received on, received on the, still back at the, generating the funding? Are we, any questions on actually generating the dollars for the budget? And I want to ask you, I think every year I've asked you this question personally, are your projections on water use realistic?
I am estimating water use similar to last year. This year, to date, our water consumption is about 80,000 CCF higher than it was last year at this time. We had a pretty dry summer, so we did get a little bit of a bump. But I'm not knowing exactly what this summer is going to look like. I'm presuming that our consumption will be similar to the prior year.
And how, excuse me, I'm sorry. And how are we doing so far moving into our last quarter, or whatever you want to call that here this year?
We We are pretty much on track for earning the revenue that was in last year's budget. We had 7.3 million. I believe we're gonna come in a little bit higher than that. Through as we're entering the fourth quarter, we still have 2 billing cycles left. So we have the April and the June. Neither of which is a particularly high billing cycle, but if it's about what it was last year at this time, then we should meet our revenue projections from the 12-13 budget.
And that includes a rate increase effective in May, correct?
Right,
Yeah,
so the
okay.
June bill will be at the higher rate.
Okay. Okay, so I guess we're
Mr.
past the,
Chairman.
oh, yes.
Mr. Saul,
Mr. Zawa?
My question is, we're now doing a rate study. If we find out the rate study says there's some portion of our patrons that are paying too much, more than they should, how are we gonna compensate that when we are already past the budget to spend that money?
The budget can always be adjusted. My understanding is that the results of the rate study will be available to the board prior to adoption of the budget, and budgets can be changed between approval and adoption. That's directly up to the board.
Do we have plans to bring the budget committee back to look at the results of the rate study?
That is not a requirement, but it certainly could be incorporated.
Yes, Mr. McNeil.
I'm curious, I like your line of reasoning. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? I don't understand for sure how all the rates are, but what I sense is that there are all kinds of people that use it, and they all have different abilities to pay. And with the, I mean, we have a really weird water district here. I mean, the geography and all of the stuff that goes into trying to make this equitable between all the payers is, I can't imagine how you do that, but.
Well, most of our customers pay a base rate, and then a certain amount
Yeah,
above
and
that.
that's graduated,
for
right,
use.
right?
And the base rate varies from industrial customers, commercial customers, private homes. So we're doing a rate study in addition to what was done last year. And we're gonna find out what each one of those customers should be charged.
Industrial versus residential versus commercial, that, okay,
I think I'm
yeah.
oversimplifying it because there's several different rates, but what we're going to find out is who pays what and how much they should pay. And what we're doing now is building a budget on what we think is going to be available. And that's the reason I asked for prioritization of decision packages, because we may not have all the funds we think we're going to have.
Right. And so, every time I'm one of these boards, I always seem to get questioned, why did you do what? And I have learned, I better get the information now, because we're gonna get a rate increase. And nobody ever pays attention, you know, when you send it out in the little thing, they don't pay attention until after they've used the water and the bill's here to pay. And they're going, what are those people doing? And I'm going, well, it costs more to make the water, you know, the power went up and the chemicals went up, if we have maintenance, you know, I mean, people think about that. And so that was kind of why I was. Oh, we're gonna get questions.
Ms. Wolfram?
I believe it was 2 years ago. There was a rate committee that was asked to look, a citizens rate committee that was asked to look at rates in the water district. They made a suggested plan to the board of commissioners. That suggested plan, while it wasn't adopted in full, wasn't adopted in part. And the part that was adopted was then brought back and shared among the commissioners with the actual rates that would be in, you know, if you approve this, it'd be these rates, if you approve this, it'd be these rates, and this is what it would look like on the rating cards. That board decided, I think it was this time of year, 2 years ago, it was just a year ago, no, I think it was 2 years ago, to accept a rate increase that was a two-year rate increase. The first rate increase went into effect, and that's what's been going on in the last year. The second part of that rate increase, the rating committees approved whatever they sent forward to the board and asked the board to do a rate plan, a rate research, and on costs and rates and everything that would go into that. So we'd have an in-depth study of the rate, not just how much do we need in revenue to survive, but what the real cost of those rates would be. And that's what's being done right now, that Mr. So is talking about. But the board previous to us, and what I assumed that's what we're working on in the rates, is the second part of that rate increase that's already in place. That went into effect, or goes into effect July 1 of this year.
But approved 2 years ago.
It's already been approved. We're not asking the board to approve the rate. The rate, they already have their rate in place. But what I hope comes out of that rate is, one, that we did our job correctly. I believe it will show that, because I think we did. But I've been wrong before, I'm sure I can be wrong again. 2, will show us a path to follow over the course of the next 5 years, so that we'll know if things are going to increase costs and things that affect our base rate. Our base rate has to be paid no matter what, because that's what it costs to produce the water. And I hope that they will give us a good solid answer about how much that may increase over the next 10 years, 5 years, so that the Board of Commissioners will be able to make adjustments in the rate accordingly. The other part that keeps coming up is, why aren't you lowering expenditures? And I think that we have had staff, administration and staff that have worked very hard to do that over the last 5, 6 years. And so I hope that they find that they're doing a good job, and if they're not, they find an area that they can improve in, so that it can be taken care of, so that that question will go away, so that we don't need to have that back taken to our staff every year. And I would just say that I agree with Mr. Soa, that I think that we need to know what's going on with that committee, so that perhaps if we could encourage the committee to bring that report to this committee. I don't know if it's available now, it doesn't sound like it, but that this committee should have some input again. That rate study would not have been necessarily been done. It might have been done, but it might not necessarily have been done if that citizen committee hadn't said, this is the rates we approve, but subject to there being a rate study done by the spring of 2013. It's getting done in the spring of 2013.
Are there any more comments on this particular topic? Because what I'd like to do, I'm going to suggest we put it as a parking lot and finish the rest of our presentation and come back to that, because it's a timing issue on what we do as a committee in terms of how we act and when we act. So that's kind of what I'd like to do. If we can, in fact, Karen, could you put that up on the board? That will be a threshold parking lot issue that we will come back to. I think there's 2 things that I saw. One is, okay, what would the committee come up with as recommendations, and how does it affect our budget that we're considering tonight? So maybe the staff can think about that question and give us some options on how we could act this evening. But I would like to finish the presentation on the budgets as we go through. We'll come back to it. Mr. Moore? I should back up just a minute. Were there any more questions here on the general fund expenditures. Otherwise, I think we're gonna move on to,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
we were only talking about revenue at this point.
Okay, oh wait, you wanna talk more about the actual expenditure side then at this point?
We haven't had any discussion.
Okay, we had a brief, here it is, what do you think about it? And so we go open discussion, we got, talking about a parking lot issue, process, timing, relative to our rate study, so we want to talk more about this. Who would like to talk more about the general fund? And I'd say what GF 17 is a good place to, has the table there and the information, so committee members, you want to talk about the expenditure side at this point?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Kerr.
I have a request to staff, if they'd be so kind. In the general fund, the recap on GF3 includes just total transfers. It would be very helpful for me at least if somewhere in the explanation you would break that out as to where the $963,000 goes. I think I found the $750 that goes to the CIP fund. The only reason for that is because from a rate standpoint, and we touched on that, everything in this expenditure side has direct on the rates. And my concern was I initially did not find the $750 transfer. I assume it's in the $963 to the capital reserve fund. Okay? Because if we're not funding our CIP on a continual basis and putting it in the rates, we're going to run out, eventually going to run out of the money he's going to need for the $30 million or whatever for the capital expenditures. And I didn't initially find that, and so I would ask if in there you would split that out for us.
And I can respond to that.
Carol, is there a graphic that you can refer to rather than talking in the air? I like to be able to see it.
I'm going to refer everybody to page A3 in the appendix.
Okay.
And that is the LB 31 report. That's the report that we will submit to the state once we have an adopted budget. And if you look at the bottom in the transfers and contingency, you can see where the transfers go. You've got revenue bond fund to the capital reserve fund, and then we also have the operating contingency.
I didn't find it, so
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Mr.
I knew you
Kerr,
had it there, but I didn't find it either.
does that satisfy your question?
Yeah, that was my question.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that we had in the general fund CIP transfer money, so that ends up in the rate base, because otherwise you're eventually run out of money for the CIPs.
Are there any other comments or questions here on this? I'm going to go back to GS 17, which is the actual expenditure side of things there. Okay, Carol, can you go ahead and how are you going to take us through the rest of these topics? We're at agenda item 11. Can we pick up on we got one other agenda item, other funds. Can we pick up on that presentation now, or is it going to move too quick? What I'm thinking about, we're not going to be able to probably move to 40 budget adoption night, but before we leave, I do want to talk about the parking lots, because that's key to, when we're going to meet again, whether we want to or not, that kind of thing. So we're going to present other funds then?
I can do that, but we will be running past 9.
I'd like to present the other funds if we can, get through that, if that's okay with the group.
And then come back to questions.
Come back to these questions.
I have some more general fund questions.
Yes, okay, we'll make sure.
So we'll come back to that.
And I want to know when we want to meet next. That's kind of the threshold, I think, based on Mr. Sauer's question there. So other funds, and we'll come back to general fund. Whoops, Ms. Wolfram?
Well, I was just hoping that we could finish with the funds we had, if Mr. Kirk has other questions. And, I mean, other funds, I appreciate wanting to finish a presentation, but going past 9 o'clock, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm fading fast.
Yeah, here, were they associated with the general fund, or the combination of the other funds and the general fund?
No, the general fund.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead, let's go ahead and cover the general fund question at this point.
I need to ask 2 questions. One is my standard every year one. Is operations getting sufficient revenues to do the turns and all the other things they need to do for the meters and the shops and all those things. Is he fully funded for what he needs to keep that on schedule?
Excuse me, before you answer, Mr. Moore, could you repeat that, please? I couldn't
Yes,
hear.
in the operations section, there's a need to turn valves and do a whole bunch of other, those kind of things. And I just want to ask again if the operations department is getting sufficient funds to meet their scheduled requirements to see that all those things are operable, so we don't have, if we should get an earthquake, that we don't have a New Orleans where they were producing 200 million a day and only doing 10 million because they couldn't shut off the valves.
No, within our current operating structure, we think that the monies that we've asked for are sufficient.
Sufficient.
You know, I don't see any need to add additional staff or any of that stuff. I think living within our means is really what we try to do with the budget, right?
And then the next question has to do with, I noticed there was a decrease in conferences and seminars for the finance department. Are there sufficient conferences and training set aside in the budget, from your opinions, for it to meet the needs of everybody in the department?
I believe that there is. What we will be doing is going to local conferences. The Oregon Municipal Finance Officers Association has 2 conferences every year. They have a spring conference that's either at the coast or near Bend. We don't have anybody scheduled to go to that, but they do have a fall conference in Portland that the conference itself, you know, these government finance people, they keep those conference costs themselves pretty low, and it's just traveling into downtown Portland, no overnight stays, no extra meals or anything. So that's what we've decided to do, was to put those resources towards the local conferences.
Okay, that'll be sufficient to keep your staff up to date.
Yes.
Those are the 2 questions that I have.
Okay. All right, Ms. Bright, can we move into the other funds then, unless anybody else had some comments about the general fund? I'm just trying to get over our fund presentation, and then we can decide where we're going to go from there.
So we do have, besides the general fund and the CIP fund, we have 4 other funds. We have a capital reserve fund, which was set up in 2009-10. We transferred dollars from the CRW reserve, which kind of lumped everything together, and we made some special reserve funds. So the beginning fund balance of the capital reserve is $3.2 million. We are transferring in, or propose to transfer in, $750,000 from the general fund. We anticipate earning about $13,000 on the dollars that are held on behalf of that fund. And then the expenditures of the CIP projects that were proposed in that discussion, nearly 1.4 million from the capital reserve fund, and the balance will remain there for future expenditures at 2.6 million. The rate stabilization fund starts with a beginning balance of $890,000. We will be earning some interest on that account as well, about $5,400. We have no plans to use rate stabilization fund in the upcoming budget year, so the amount will remain there, $896,000. The SDC reserve fund, we have a beginning balance of 2.2, an estimated beginning balance of 2.2. We are not anticipating a great deal of SDC monies coming in the upcoming year. We actually have budgeted a little bit less than what we have collected this year, but it's kind of a hard predictor. We don't have a lot of growth options within our district, so we are keeping a pretty conservative estimate there, and we'll earn interest on the balances there. We'll be sending $1.7 million to the CIP fund for those capital projects that were discussed earlier, and we'll send about $256,000 to the revenue bond fund to pay a portion of that bonded debt payment, with leaving a balance of about $285,000 in the SDC fund.
Is that by the end of the year?
Yes.
Thank you.
Then we also have the revenue bond fund, beginning balance of $468,000. We are keeping a balance in that fund equal to the last payment. This is part of our agreements with the bondholders. We will earn some interest on the balances. We're gonna transfer money in from both the general fund and the SDC fund to make the payments. We have a principal payment of $340,000, interest payments of about $106,000, leaving an ending fund balance of $493,000. The remaining balance on that outstanding debt from the 2009 refunding is about $2.8 million. That's after the principal payment that we made this year. So that's it on the other funds.
Okay, Mr. Moore, at this point, do you have any more to add to your budget presentation?
No.
Okay, what I'd like to do is, before we get into discussing our strategy of where we go next, because it is 9:02, and we obviously not going to be able to conclude our business here, I don't think. But I did want to offer an opportunity for public comment again, and for questions or comments. And then we'll move quickly into decide where we want to go this evening at this point. Are there any public comments? Okay. Mr. Moore, can you suggest to us some options where we want to go from here? We obviously aren't going to get our work done tonight, but you heard some discussion about this rate study, and if we want to listen to that rate study, where would we best meet again, kind of thing?
We have advertised for 3 budget
Right.
committee meetings, the next one being next Thursday,
Right.
May 2nd at 6 p.m., and then we have another one on May 16th. We also anticipate having the FCS group who's doing the rate study come in and speak with the board on May 9th.
May 9th?
And that is a board meeting tonight as well. May 9th is.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Wolf, go ahead.
I'd make a suggestion that we might want to take the information we've gleaned this week, we have a shorter meeting at the advertised meeting date next week, then temporarily adjourn the meeting or let it sit until the 16th to vote on anything that we have to do business-wise, which would then give those committee members who wish to attend the board meeting on the 9th a chance to go to the board meeting, listen to the FCS report, ask their questions and public comment there, or maybe even a separate time for the budget committee to ask questions. Who knows what the chair may decide to do. But it'll give us a chance to get more information about that before we come back on the 16th and then go through the process of approving our work to be sent forward to the board.
Do I have any other thoughts here among the board member, committee members of how we want to approach this? I pose one question to the staff. Would we physically have to meet to continue to the May 16th meeting? Would we have to physically meet next Thursday for it to be, it's kind of silly to have to personally meet and then just, take 2 minutes, continue the matter to the next meeting.
No, that's strictly within the purview of this committee.
Then I would suggest we do that.
We would have to advertise that the meeting was canceled. So we would have to do
Or you
that
mean it's
for-
been canceled but
Yes.
reset?
Yes.
Do you think that's feasible then, as an alternative or not? Do we have the time to do that?
You want to cancel the meeting? Yes.
If you were to have to advertise, do you have the lead time you need to do that?
Yeah. And, we have the website, we have
Right.
other tools that we can use to cancel.
My concern is that a public showing up on the 2nd and finding out there's nobody here. So,
I think we have more than enough time. What's the day? It's Thursday. Yeah, so we could get it out tomorrow. It would go in the paper, Monday? I think, and that would give people,
We would also put it on the website.
and we put it on the website, so I think we have more than enough time.
how does the committee feel about that, arranging, just not actually having to meet next week and then?
Would you like a motion, Mr. Chair?
Just a moment, if we can, because on the rate study, I guess the other thing I want to pull the committee on, does the committee want to learn about that individually? Or does the committee want to have some sort of presentation by either staff or the group, whoever, as part of our next meet. And Mr. Humberstone?
Well, since we are going to have a CRW board regular meeting on the 9th, and FCS is going to present that night, my suggestion would be to cut to a simple chase here, cancel the meeting on the 2nd. We all should be here, either in the audience or as board members, to hear that presentation, and then we would come back on the 16th with that information and finalize our budget recommendations to the board.
What is May 9th? What time?
It's a Thursday.
That would be 6 p.m., yes.
May 9th?
Yes.
Okay, I see.
And if it pleases the chair, I will so move.
Second.
Before we do, I just wanted
Okay.
to.
And I withdraw.
That's okay. I wanted to poll the rest of the group. Anybody have any thoughts beside this offer? Okay, so we're hearing, I do have one comment that's coming. So we're hearing there's a leaning toward cancellation of our next meeting, but meeting back on the 16th. Mr. Sawa?
I'm a firm believer that the budget committee should stay involved in the budget process as much as they can. So it really doesn't do any good for the budget committee to pass a budget and then at a later date the board meets and changes the budget. And so they're sitting out there wondering, well, how come it changed? So I want to try to keep the budget committee involved as best as we can. And the proposal that you guys are talking about is a good way of starting that process.
Okay. Is this May 9th presentation of this rate study, will it furnish some adequate information that will help us decide on our budget discussion so it's more productive on the 16th?
Yes, it will be a full recommendation. Now, we might tweak that a little bit based upon the discussion here, but what was intended would be a full recommendation by FCS group to the board of what the proposed rates should be, and then there's some additional data like a benchmark study and some other materials there. What I would like to do, Mr. Chairman, is just to ask a quick question of staff to find out what that agenda might look like so that we make sure that we give this board, this body sufficient time to really ask the kind of questions that need to be asked of the rate experts. So, Bob, do you have anything, Adam, do you have anything coming?
We have no items for the May 9th meeting, the new June department.
It's a relatively, excuse me,
Yeah.
as I recall, it was a relatively short agenda.
Yeah, I think it's relatively short. I just needed to check that to make sure. So I think we're good to go. The other advantage of doing that is that it saves us money in terms of having the consultant not have to come back twice.
That's
We
true.
can do it, we can kill two birds with one stone.
Okay, Mr. Moore, when do you expect that study to be available to the board and
We have a
committee members that would like to see it?
We have a request out as a result of conversation with the board to have that information come in before May 9th. We haven't gotten an answer back.
Okay.
And then I would ask the board, if we got it back, I think I'm hearing in the affirmative, that it would be appropriate to share that with the rest of the budget committee. I think that's what I'm hearing.
No problem.
That would be very helpful.
Mike?
Okay, any more comments or thoughts on our process? Because I will go ahead and entertain a motion at this point. Mr. Humbertson?
Then I will move to cancel the meeting on the 2nd. Encourage all members of this committee to show up on the 9th to hear the FCS study and reconvene the committee on the 16th as advertised.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to cancel the May 2nd meeting, encourage attendance at the May 9th CRW board meeting, and a reconvene of the budget committee meeting on May 16th. Any discussion?
I have one.
Yes, Mr. Moore.
I would recommend to this committee that you have us modify the May 9th announcement, letting the general public know that we're gonna be, that the board and the budget committee are gonna be talking about rates. Because that, right now, it just says that it's gonna be a recommendation to the board, but it doesn't necessarily state that this is an opportunity for the general public to come and have comment as well, although the board has been pretty expeditious about doing that, and I think just letting them know that that's gonna be a change, I think would be helpful.
Well, as a clarification on the motion did not include actual attendance by the committee unless they so choose individually. So I wouldn't want to create an expectation that the full committee is attending the board meeting. Are you encouraging, you think that?
I'm concerned about the public that's not here.
Right.
That if it sounds like what we're talking about is a more open meeting for discussion of the rates, and it would be helpful for the public to know that, but.
Oh, I agree, yes. So it doesn't affect our motion, okay? Any other further discussion on the motion?
Just a question to Mr. Moore.
Yes.
This is not going to be forestalling any further rate work that may come about, either lowering or increasing or establishing a 5-year plan that may take effect in the month of June when there's I believe, a rate hearing proposed and approval of some sort of rate structure. Is that in the approval, or is that in the forecast of dates?
We have not determined any kind of a rate hearing because we haven't heard the recommendation yet from FCS.
Yeah, so it's a lower or raise.
Yeah, so until we have that, so until after May 9th.
So there's no
rate hearing.
Vote occurring at anything, and we have the rate established for the coming year because of the vote taken in the previous year.
This meeting with FCS is informational to the board. It is not an opportunity for the board to approve a change in rates.
Okay. So I guess that ties back to our meetings. If we find out that the recommendation is lowered and something needs to be changed within the budget, then this will come back to this committee to take steps appropriate to whatever they bring in, I take it.
Well, I think what I'm hearing is this committee last year recommended to the board that there be a rate study. And based upon that, the board directed staff to do a rate study.
That's correct.
This committee, unless you have the process that we put in place, will not have had an opportunity to see the results of that rate study.
Mm-hmm.
And so this would give this committee, along with the board, an opportunity to hear the results of the rate study.
Before we vote for it.
Then I think the board would have to decide what they want to do beyond that in terms of more studies, more meetings, whatever.
Just want to make sure it was clear.
So when you, whatever you write up for the public's benefit, you'll assure them that we're not talking about rate changes for FY 13-14 until perhaps later in the budget season.
No,
Because we're not setting rates anymore. The rates are already going to be taking effect.
This is the rate. This is really their findings that they're going to be communicating to the board.
I guess what I'm saying is that the board itself might discuss raising rates during the fiscal year, but we're not going to talk about June going with another rate increase right on top of the May 4th rate increase, unless we're talking down the road somewhere.
right.
So I think that would be important clarification for the public to know that even though it's being discussed, it's not something that's imminent, you might say, within kind of thing. Any other discussion on the motion? The motion being that we cancel our May 2nd meeting, encourage everyone to show up at the May 9th board meeting, and that we reconvene on May 16th. Correct. Can I hear the ayes?
Aye.
Nays? Any abstentions? Okay, so it's unanimous. We'll see everybody at least on the 16th then. And Mr. Moore, would you be sure to make sure every member gets a copy of whatever public notice you put out?
Sure. I think you saw them on the pages.
May 16th, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right. So now, if everybody's gonna go home, we'll recess the meeting.
Yes. Do I have a motion to recess the meeting?
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Hubbard, second by Mr. Maloney. Recess till May 16th. Oh, excuse me. I'm told that we can recess the meeting without a vote. Under Robert's Rules of Order. I'll take care. All right.